which is John Muir. And isn't that the truth with bees? They're attached to the whole rest of life. So, swarms. Here we go. Our intention this year, and I'll say it again because every time I say it, I help myself think my way through it. If you want to be a person who can go out and get a swarm, like for us to call you, and you want to be on call for that, you need to be somebody who's pretty much available 24/7. So this isn't good for people who have day jobs, because if a swarm shows up and we call you, you can't say, I can get them after work. Because we're finding these days that they don't stay long in one place. Sometimes they're only 20 minutes and then they're gone. And I don't know what that's about. Sometimes they used to sit longer. You had a few hours. Like the first swarm I ever got was over in Portland. So, the call finally got to me. Then I had to drive over to Portland, and their little swarm is still there hanging out in the rose bush. I mean, so if you want to get a swarm from us for free, you need to be available, because it's really awful for the person who's doing the swarm list calls, who's going to be Deb, to have to run down 3 or 4 or 5 numbers before she finds somebody home, because time's just slipping away like that. So, yes?
When we travel, could we notify the sworn person that we aren't available from
Sure.
here to here?
Yeah.
Yes. As far as
Yeah. So
weekends, I mean, we're out for weekends too, so you need to let me know what your availability is when you sign up on the swarm list.
yeah, and if there are certain days that you're always available on those days, then we will call you. But the first time we call you and nobody answers the phone, we'll drop you off the list, because last year we were like this, trying to track people down. And I mean, we were toward the middle of summer, we were calling people, and either nobody was home or everybody had bees, and we had swarms with no one to pass them on to. I mean, and that doesn't really happen. You're out there wanting them. So it's just, how do we get a hold of you and how do we make this work? So that's the thing where if you want the swarm for free and if you'd like us to give you a call, we will do that. The other option that you have for free swarms is you can get as proactive as you want. I got a call yesterday from the pesticide company that you called last year, and they said, this number's not working quite. We want to update. Who can we call? So I gave them my number. So if you want to call pesticide companies and say, I can do bee removal and swarm removal, do that. If there are local property manager companies in your area, those are great resources. The bees are always landing in stairwells and stuff in apartment buildings, and those people never know who to call. So we're also, Thea and I are going to get some business cards made up that just say Preservation Beekeeper and our swarm number and, our email address and stuff, so people can find us, and we'll hand out batches of those to you all for that.
Well, let me add something about the card. So last year, when I went out to my local area looking for possible swarm people to call me, I have my own beekeeping card, kindly swarm catcher. Anyway, when I gave them my card, I said, if you can't get a hold of me, if I don't answer the phone, please call Preservation Beekeeping. And I said, that's how I did the cards. I did my personal card for my local little area, and then the Preservation Beekeeping card. So it would be nice, when you go to produce those for them, for those who actively in their neighborhoods go looking for people who might have swarms.
And depending on where you're living, I've got that, that next door Crown Park thing. That's where I live. That next door program that reaches about 4,500 people. And I post on that every week during the summer. If you find bees, give me a call. And I get calls. So it's very handy to get out to your neighbors like that. And so that's now, if you want bees and you're not going to be able to go out and get them yourself on your own, there are 2 options. We will have a list of a couple of places that we know of locally where you can buy bees. And they're local bees, and we can't say that they're treatment free because I don't think any of them are. And they'll sell you like nucleus colonies, which is just a small colony of bees in Langstroth frames that you'll have to figure out how to get into an alternative hive if you don't have a Langstroth. And they're about between $160 and $180. That's about what they're running now. Or if you, we're going to collect people's hive boxes, and we'll be putting them in different houses. If you're over in the Portland area, I would say drop it off to Thea. We'll be giving you her address, and she'll line them up in her yard. And if you're on this side of the water, you can drop them off at my house or Pixie's house, and we're going to be setting them up in lines. Okay. So we have our northern people too. And what I'm going to do is I'll take the hives as they come in, you know, first come, first serve, boom, 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 down the line. And as I get swarm calls or as my bees swarm, then I will put them into those boxes, or I'll go out on swarm calls and I'll put them into the boxes, and I'll give you a call and tell you when you have bees. And the fee for that is $80 because the person collecting them gets 50 and the person who's on the phone gets 30. So that makes our little local bee economy. And if you bring your hive over, you don't have to get to it fast, like you have to come tonight and get it. If it sits there a week or two or you're on vacation, it's fine because the bees are going to be building and they're ready to go. So that's how we're going to do that. I'll just have them all lined up. Yes?
I know that some people bringing the bees back to their house if it's in a box. Like, do they have a vehicle that's big enough, or do they have a vehicle where if bees get out, you know, even if we've stopped up the entrance, you know, is that a problem? Well, I got a truck very specifically, so that wouldn't be an issue. And so I've got a big old Ford pickup truck and with a camper shell in the back, and I will, if somebody needs to have their beehive brought to their house.
Free delivery.
Yeah, that's what the money, if I get any money from this at all, it'll be to pay for the gas. Because you know, this F-250, 86, you know, it's a gas guy. It gets like 10 miles per gallon. So that's what it'll pay for. But I will bring it to your house if you need it. So I'm just offering that. Yeah.
Frequently, you know, when you stop up a hive and you put the bees in, you'll get escapees. I just somehow they're like little hairy Houdinis, and it's no big deal to have a bee buzzing around in your car. It's not like if they get out, they're all going to attack you. They'll just buzz around the windows and go, "What the heck?" And then when you get to where you're going, as you carry it out, usually those bees will kind of follow you. Like, well, here's the box. I guess I'm going there. So don't worry about if a few bees get out. It's just not a big deal. And so that's how we're going to be doing that. And let's see, someone called me this week about bringing their hive over to my place. Are they here? Was it you? No. Was it you?
Was it?
Okay. The call got dropped when I went looking back for it. So it was like, I couldn't call you, but now, pretty much now is the time. So anybody, I will hand you my business card while we're here, then you'll know where I live, and you can just make arrangements, and I'll start lining them up in my backyard. So swarms can start anywhere from the end of March, you know, which that's the rare ones, and then certainly right into April, it all starts happening pretty quick.
How far into the season does it continue?
It can go, last year it went into early July. Yeah, and when you get these later swarms, you know, you really need to carry them through with food all the way through fall because they're really trying to build up in time for winter. And the later in the season, they've got these like beekeeping phrases. A swarm in May is worth a ton of hay. A swarm in June is worth a silver spoon. A swarm in July isn't worth a fly. And the swarm in August, let them go bust or something like that. It's like the later that you get, the harder it is for the bees to establish, which is a helpful thing if you have a hive that's perished, because then if you get a late swarm, well, at least they're moving in and they've got all the wax built. So there's, and your first years are just the most difficult because you don't have comb, you don't have honey, you don't have hives that smell like bees. I mean, once you've done it like a year or two, you know people who have swarms, you know people if you need to go get some extra comb for bait hives, you know people to help you with your hives. It's that first year that's kind of, whoa, how do we do all this? Yes?
If we're making our bait boxes next week, can we just leave them with you at that point? Or
No, because you're going to want to hang them around your place,
Oh, okay.
right? Those are for you to take home in case you want to like trap swarms in your area. So we're recommending for those who can afford it, please try to start yourself out with 2 hives. So maybe bring a hive body over to me and keep one at home and hang your bait hives up. And my hope is that you won't just have the one. You'll have the experience of making the one here, but I'll send you home with extra comb and everything else. If you want to make 5 of them and hang them along areas like out by the Washougal, where the bowling alley used to be, there's a boat launch there. When I go and sit there with my dog in the summer, I always see bees drinking right along the shore. So I know there's bees close by. So that would be a great place to hang some bait hives. Yes?
You just mentioned a while ago, you did this, and then I remember somebody saying something in one of the meetings, it was either you or Jacqueline, about the fact that if comb is older, the bees don't seem interested in it.
No.
Is that not the case? So
I misheard. So then any comb that's in my freezer, I can
Yes,
as
the blacker the better. Bees like to be where other.
I didn't mean dark. I meant old as in I've had it for several years.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't
matter. It's got the smell of bees. And usually the older, darker comb, they like it better because brood's been in it and it really smells like bees, so no problem at all. Bees, when they're using comb, will hit a point where they'll quit working it. Like it's too old for me to use, we're going to fly out, the wax moths will come in. But bees going into an old hive like to see that stuff, and they'll tear some of it down and they'll start building fresh wax. So old comb is good. So we'd be able to provide you with all that. But putting out bait hives is really kind of fun. I mean, it's pretty awesome to just hang it up and go back a week later and go, bees. So, you know, and not many people do that on this side of the water, it seems. It seems pretty popular over in Portland. I guess that the beekeeping club over there has, you know, really impressed upon people to start doing that. Yeah.
And we have berries in our area and traveling bees come. So if I hung out a bait pen, I imagine I would catch that variety of bee coming
Yes.
down off the blueberry vines.
Yes. Yes.
I'm probably in a whole other category then in terms of they are reputed to be angry and upset and grouchy because they move around all the time.
So the bees, they might be, but swarm bees almost go into like a trance mode. They don't behave like whatever their hive normally behaves like. They're usually extremely docile. They pour like a liquid almost rather than bee by bee. They have this whole different way of being in those few days when they're swarming. And the good news is you would say, okay, you're going to be getting swarms off of bees that are heavily managed and treated. However, they will have made it through a winter or they wouldn't be swarming. So you know that that queen has made it through the winter. So they're already on their way when you catch them to rewilding themselves. So it's a great idea to hang them. Any more questions on the swarm stuff?
Just real quick, I know you didn't yet. Did you folks back there get to see the bee with a barrel?
No, I haven't passed her around yet.
Okay, it went around.
Really? Okay. Okay. Well, yes, that came out of this hive. It's the only one I found, you know, with a varroa mite on it. So I thought, oh, people should be able to see this.
I'm impressed with the group that Japanese swarm class, the 8th of April. Please, if you want to keep bees, and you're keeping bees in this style, you're going to have swarms in your garden. And it's just, even if you don't want to go out swarm catching, that class for your own beekeeping in your own yard is very important.
Good point.
I just want to stress that.
Good point. Yeah, I expect to have 10 to 15 to 20 swarms in my backyard this year. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm a one-woman bee swarm factory. Okay, let's do the state of the garden. Pixie, can you do the state of the garden? What are we seeing blooming right now, and what can we expect?
Let's see, in my garden, what's out right now is actually what's preparing for the mason bees. And that is all those little weeds, you know, the cress that's growing in your garden, that when you pull it, the seeds pop in your eyes. Okay, those and the chickweed and the dandelion, those kind of weeds are already out there feeding the wild bees. No, there aren't many, but I am seeing a few. And then the other things like rosemary's and buds, she's just waiting, I think, for her first kiss from a bee. And a lot of things are in bud, but if you notice the trees, they're already producing mass quantities of pollen. So right now, as far as feeding the garden, feeding the bees, you look at what you didn't destroy and what you can't reach, and that's where they're going.
So the state of the unity at this time of the year, we had a slight warm up where everybody who have bees probably saw their bees out. And then all of a sudden everything got really cold again. And in my hives, what I noticed was, oddly enough, this last cold snap, and then it's slightly warming up, the last cold snap resulted for me in a lot of dead bees. And I hadn't seen many all winter long. They weren't losing a lot, but in the last cold snap, then when they finally came out, they just started really dumping out their dead. And I'm seeing 50, 100 bees or more outside on the landing board every morning right now. But that's also an indicator that the bees are starting, the queen is laying eggs now, brood are being born, so there's more bees who can take out the dead. You know, in the winter they were kind of down to their smaller numbers, so now there's more numbers for house cleaning and things like that, and you're seeing the hives are really starting to be emptied out of the bees that didn't make it during the winter. Questions?
Yeah, do you get pollen from evergreen trees?
Yes. Yeah. Pine pollen and things, certainly. And a lot of those pollen resins, the pollen on, I think a lot of the fir trees and the needle trees are also one of the ingredients in a lot of the propolis that we have locally. Yeah. So, so the bees are building. There are some more dead showing up. There's the hives are really wanting to be out now. They say that bees don't fly below 50 degrees, but they do here in the Northwest. So it's like, nope, okay. This is still the time when you would not go into the hives because the days are just too cold and the afternoons chill right out, and you don't want to mess up the hive temperatures right now. So we're just in this little bit of holding pattern, but the pollen's coming in, and pretty soon the nectar's going to be coming in. So the bee year is about to really kick in. Swarm processes are already going on within the hive. We can't see them and we don't know what they are, but we know that it takes a good month or more for bees to determine about swarming and who's going to swarm and what stores are going to be taken. So the swarm attitude is big on the bee's mind. And once we get going and the swarms start coming, if you have a hive and it swarms once, there's a really good chance that within the next 10 days, 8 to 10 days, it'll swarm again and maybe again. They throw off these secondary swarms with virgin queens after the main swarm leaves with the old queen. So Jacqueline's going to be going into great detail about all of that in the swarm class. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what that swarm, what the swarming means to bees insofar as we understand right now. We don't understand all of it. Even Thomas Seeley would say we don't know all of what happens within a swarm, and even all of the reasons why it's beneficial to bees to do it. So swarm's going to be coming. It's going to be an exciting time, and I went over to Jacqueline's this week. This is the time of the year when some of the hives that haven't been doing well, but you nursed them through the winter, might die. It's like, well, how come they made it all the way through the winter and now they're collapsing? And in some cases, the problem is varroa mites, because in the winter, the varroa can't breed. They're just feeding off the bees that are there, feeding. And then as soon as the bees start laying brood, man, this varroa just dive into those cells. So a lot of times the first bees that are hatched out are not well. And like I'll notice in my hives, bees just walking along the ground, a lot of them. And I know that they're new hatches because they're like really fuzzy, just fuzzy and smaller, and they're not even able to get up off the ground. And I know that those first bees of the season are almost, especially the drones, are kind of like the varroa sacrifices. But that's not the only reason. And I went into Jacqueline's Langstroth. This was a 4-box Langstroth. This is a medium deep box, and it was 4 boxes tall. And this was on the bottom. This was the bottom box. This hive was alive up until about a month ago. It was really strong in the fall. It was, she said every morning she'd see a dead yellow jacket or two. They were having their yellow jacket wars and they were killing them right on the landing board. It was like, you're not coming in here. So, and she knew the hive was stuffed with honey. So it was like, okay, they're going in the winter really good. This is a 3-year-old hive. So it's been functioning pretty much untouched and strong for 3 years. And then suddenly, poof, gone. So she said, you know, I'm kind of curious. I'd like to know why they're not there. And so I decided that we would do an autopsy of this box. The other 3 boxes were just full of honeycomb. So there's nothing to see there. It's just honeycomb. And if this hive has a story to tell, it'll be down here in the brood boxes. So what I was going to do is we're going to take out each frame. I'm going to lay them out on the table. And I'll sit on this side of the table. You can pass up here and kind of be around, but I'm going to point out what I'm seeing in some of these cells and what it's making me think. When you do an autopsy like this, you can't just look at the comb and try to read it and go, okay, what do I think happened here? Because if a hive perished, there's all these different outside forces that are also in process going on in here. So when I look at this box, the first thing I have to ask myself before I even go in is, okay, what time of the year did they die? How old was the hive? What's the weather been like? You know, is there anything I noticed unusual about them in the last few weeks? Like the numbers have been dropping off for months, or suddenly it was done, or, you know, what am I seeing here? And then, so when I go in, I know, okay, these got through most of the winter. They had tremendous food stores, so nobody starved to death. I know that's not a problem. They went into the winter with a queen because they had been bringing in pollen the whole time, and that was all well. So it's like, okay, they're 3 years old. They went in the winter with a queen. They have a ton of honey. It wasn't a very cold winter. So I know that they didn't freeze to death either. So I can kind of knock those few things out of the way. And then we start to look at the comb. So let me lay these guys out. Any questions so far?
Yes, we've had a couple about the varroa mite on the beak. Is its color usually
It's frequently on that part of the body in terms of you being able to see it. They are also able, and they frequently do, slip beneath the bottom. Yeah, you know, the little abdomen is in sections. They'll slide up underneath the section, and they'll be harder to see. Um, the bees have a hard time cleaning them off of up here because they can't get their little arms back there. So sometimes they'll just hitch a ride on their thoraxes, or you'll see them on the back abdomen, and sometimes like right on the head. And the color is normally a brighter red. That's a dead one, and the bee is getting a little bit dark. But when I first pulled it out of the hive, I saw that kind of little reddish. But you can see it gives you a good idea of how large they are. That it's not like, God, I wonder if they're all in here and I can't see them at all. Well, that tells you no, you can very clearly see them with the naked eye.
I wonder if the rest of the clouds would like that be passed around again. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't even see the varroa.
Okay, there's a little varroa mite on her
Thorax.
on her thorax. So take a little look at her. She's a shiny little blob, and that's the only bee I found with a mite on her in the whole hive. So yeah, so yeah.
So you were talking about it's not a good time to be opening up the hive because of the weather. But however, if you have a weak hive and you knew it was weak going in, okay, you're suspecting that they probably are going to need food. So you've got to get in there. I mean, how else are you going to know? You know what I'm saying?
This is true.
I've been waiting until like now it's clearing. It's supposed to get warm by Monday, and maybe waiting until then and later in the afternoon before.
What do you have? What is your hive? You have a Langstroth? How many boxes is it? 2. Okay, here's a real easy one. Lift it. If it weighs a ton, you don't need to go in.
Yeah, right.
It's light. Okay, then you probably will
Because I
need
have
feed.
2 hives, and the other hive
Weighs a ton.
and they're
Okay.
busted. I
Okay.
mean, they're good. I'm not
Okay.
But this one, yeah. And then since it's cold,
Mhm.
like you said, they came out, they were flying. I saw activity. They looked okay, but now you see them dead.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a whole lot in it, so
The weather, before you go in, and make sure what their forecast is.
I think I'm just gonna
no, I'm not doing the
lay them out in order.
If you open during the day and it's all nice and warm, and they're forecasting for a real dawn.
Well, it might out there, because you know how that is.
Yeah, so that's quite pleasant.
So when should I do it? Because it should be just like it was 32 one.
Okay.
But I mean, I got to get in because so I take a chance and don't see them on the start. See, that's the thing I know. Yeah. I don't know what to do because I just have a feeling that every because if there's flash fires, you know it's not going to drop. And where I am, it's kind of outside. You know,
That's true.
Okay, wait a second. So in terms of feeding, I did a class last week for the last 2 weeks, and one of the things that we stressed in that class, and that I'm stressing to all of you, is get echo floors on your hive. When you have an echo floor on your hive, you never have a question about how do I get into the hive to feed, okay? It answers that totally and forever. All the stuff about I needed to get in and feed because it was cold and then I froze all my bees. If you have an echo floor beneath your hive, right, like one of these boxes can be your echo floor, stack the rest of your hive on top of it, fill all this with detritus so any moisture going down will be absorbed. Cut a little door into it so you can feed underneath. You're going to lose none of the heat in the hive by opening the bottom up. You slide in your food and the bees can get to it easily. So that's another reason why I really pitch every hive should have a box on the bottom that's the fall away. and that's where you feed. And it's all taken care of. No more complex things about when do I open my hive or not. I've gone into the bottoms now of my 2 skeps that are on echo floors and looked in there. One of the hives is, you know, the bottom is fairly light, but the top just feels packed. So I slid in a little jar of a little plate of honeycomb, and they haven't touched it. So that tells me that they're better off than I thought. They're not needing it. They're preferring their own honey stores. But it's that box on the bottom that will save you all these questions about what day do I open it? What's the weather like? What if they need food, but oh geez, I don't know what to do. Well, there you have it. And it's an easy solution. It's an easy solution. Yeah.
Is the bottom,
It's open to the bottom. If you've got a wire mesh on your next box, take it off.
no, I meant, okay, the box at the bottom, there's a floor. I mean,
There's a floor on there, or you can even, I mean, I set all my hives on tables, right? So it doesn't matter to me if I just got a screen bottom or not. So sometimes if I just want to be cheap, I'll just do a whole tacking of screen on the bottom. I dump my stuff in there. I've got my little door here, and I start my hive bodies going on top. Whatever you find in your yard, rake up some crap and throw it in. So long as you're not doing, that you're not doing, yes, that's bee terminology. Get the crap and throw it in. So if you're like, don't have hopefully you're not spraying pesticides and things in your yard, okay? So whatever you rake up is fine. Leaves, old grass, twigs. I collected a load of wood mulch from some trees that were being chopped down. It's about 3 years old now, and I just grab handfuls of that and I throw it in. And wild mushrooms, if you find herbs in your yard, you can throw those in, whatever you want to do. That's your little area where you can work and you won't disturb the bees in the slightest. So, okay, onward to this hive. When I opened it, the first thing that really surprised me about it was, the first thing I looked for was all the dead bees, right? Because this hive was full going into the fall and she expired. So I'm looking, when the combs are set up like this, I look through all 3 boxes and I'm looking down in between the combs and I'm not seeing any cluster of bees stuck up here anywhere where maybe there was a small cluster and then they just died. So there were no clusters of bees between the combs. And then I lifted off the last box and I saw the bottom, the floor of the hive, maybe 30 bees. Nothing. So, okay, when I go into the hives, come on up. I want to work on the other side and let them walk over here. Okay. So, first thing you're looking at here is the burr comb. This is what they're building between the boxes to convince themselves that these bars aren't a floor, right? What you're seeing here is obviously a lot of pollen. If you hold it up to the light, I mean, it's just full of pollen. So they've got a lot of pollen, absolutely no brood. This looks like nectar, which must have been nectar from last winter because there's no nectar that they're picking up now, right? So you're just seeing tons and tons and tons of pollen stores and some nectar from last year. All of the sealed honey was up above. If I flip them, so you look at the total other sides of the comb, all in order. Yes, exactly why. All pollen, all colored.
That's all the pollen.
Yeah. And what that one will probably do is cut out these sections and freeze and keep the pollen because it's really good to eat, or you could also feed it back to the bees. So what I'm looking at here is drone comb, deep, bigger. This is brood. Now all of these are completely dark combs except these would have been used for brood and then refilled back with honey. These are the lighter combs on the outside where less brood is produced. This is the interior of the hive where it's all brood. So I'm actually like no brood. So the queen never started laying this spring, which makes me think that she must have failed over the winter. She must have been lost, or else there would be some kind of brood. This here is honey. This is what sealed honey looks like. There. So it's got that kind of a lumpy texture to it. And brood, absolutely nothing. Now, what I would also do is I'm going to look really closely into these combs for what I would call, no, I know that they're not here. So I'm going to hold them up and I'm going to look in the combs. I'm going to try to get into the light. And I want you all to pick up the comb and look at it real closely. And what you're looking for in there is any white, just little white kind of little white specks in the comb. No, that's actually that's a good question. What is that?
Yeah, there's one there too. Solid white.
Would it be a film line?
No, it'll just be little like this.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I don't know.
We'll tell you when after we look for it. What's the white speck we're looking for? Show me your white specks.
I don't see any on there.
Okay.
So right in there, in the bottom. That cell.
Ah, very good. Okay, I'm going to pass this around. I want you all to take a look at my. We have some white specks. See where my finger is? No, really. You need to just pass this sucker around and look at it. See right here on the edges. Let's do another one where. Oh, yeah.
See, like way down inside. You're not talking about
You're right.
that.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay.
So what are we looking at there?
Take this comb and tilt it slightly toward you. When you do that, you'll see all the little white spots. Pass it around and look at that. Don't say, okay, yeah, right. No, look at it. Okay. And look at it
Hold
until
that
you
side.
can see it. Okay?
Filled it?
I'm going to tell you after you look at it.
I just see. I just see it going all the way through. Okay, we're not seeing it.
Because they've been taking care of the sides. So each year it gets darker.
That's what she's
darker,
talking
darker.
about. See, like in
Because
here?
essentially
See, like right in here?
Every time they take babies out of that cell, they're going to add more propolis to it. So it just darkens and darkens and darkens.
Is it like right there?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at it
A little
from this
tiny-
side, I see tons of
Oh,
it.
okay, I see now. Oh, yeah, now I see it. Okay, back.
Yes,
Back
got
in.
it. Got it?
Look back this way. Look down and look back this way. You can see it back. Yeah. How you hold it.
So is anybody seeing this one? Really? If I hold it down here and I tilt this to the white.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you can see it in this one too. I see it now. Can you see that if you look down this way? Like right in here. That's what she's talking about. She's not talking about that.
Susan.
You can really see it on that
Yeah, there's one that you can just, it's all over. Those my eggs were looking
Oh, look, they're right there. There's a whole, oh no, there's a whole bunch right there. See, right there.
Yes.
All right there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. There's a whole lot
Yeah,
right in here.
a whole lot in there.
Okay, so we're starting to see it better. Okay. I want you to get used to flipping these phones and looking at them.
Did you see one of those over there?
I didn't see any.
You didn't see any on there? There's someone.
There's someone else.
Yeah, if you, I can see them all down in there.
Oh, yeah.
See them?
As you, yeah, let me show these.
It's the light how you, yeah. Right. And those are so hard to see. Yeah, you have to keep, yeah.
No. Okay, let's put these guys back in here. I'll tell you when you all get when you're all good and you've all tidied up your stuff. No. Yeah.
I can see over the corner here. How's that?
Okay, have a seat, folks. Yeah, I have to wipe down the table.
We were following.
Okay. Okay, gotta rinse off my hands a second.
No.
Since you were right there, for next week, they would have a list of your next month. If you want to do a big box, your name on the list. Yeah. Just one of those notebooks. Probably that one right there. Yeah. And then she said
Well, first, we'll tell you that it usually takes 3 years for Varroa to expand enough to wipe out a really good sized healthy hive. So the white stuff that you were seeing, that's Varroa mite droppings. They're back in there in the cells and they're white, a little bit stringy and packed back there. And, you know, sometimes we'll have people post pictures online and say, is this Varroa mite droppings? And it's like, no, that's pollen. No, that's ivy. No, that's honey. But those white things that it took you a while to see by tilting and looking, the more we looked, the more we saw. Your eyes get more used to, oh, now I know what I'm looking for. And all of a sudden you see it all over the place. So this hive The queen did not much start laying again. The bottom is full of varroa droppings, and there were absolutely no bees left in the hive, 30, 40 bees. That's it. So my suspicion is that sometime in the course of the winter, those bees left. They just left because the varroa made it unmanageable to stay in the hive, and they weren't going to be able to work with it. So they just left because you just don't. That's what they used to call colony collapse disorder. They would say, the beekeepers come into the bee yard in the spring, and there's no bees, and they open up the hives, and there's no bees. It's like, well, where did they go? And people will say, well, they were out in the field and it was a varroa, and slowly the numbers began dropping. But this is a system where they're not out in the field. The numbers weren't dropping slowly. They were there and then they were gone, and all of them were gone. So it's like, you didn't even get a big drop of dead bees. They just left. And that's what I'm suspicious of. But the other thing with anything that you see in here is it's real easy to say something like it was varroa because we see a lot of varroa. But in a healthy hive that's able to manage it, it doesn't much matter. I mean, you'll see mite droppings and stuff, but the bees will have worked out a situation where they're able to manage the varroa, so it's not that. And I just want you to not jump on, oh, it was this, or oh, it was that. I am only speculating here. The bigger things that I can't see all weigh into this as well, like how healthy was the queen? How poisoned was she from being fed, tainted food for 3 years or 4 years? So when she started failing, did everybody just decide, that's it, we can't even make another queen, it's the middle of winter and we're out of here? So, or is it that you're in a situation you don't know why the bees died, there's a little tiny clump, you don't know why there's just a little clump left. Usually that's like a die-off over the winter, and there weren't enough bees to keep themselves warm, and then the cluster just kind of slowly freezes because they need a certain amount of mass. Yes?
If bees make a decision like that to leave, then it's suicide, or
It's
where are they
suicide.
going?
It's suicide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
It's,
why choose that versus just staying dying?
I have absolutely no idea, but maybe the discomfort of the mites and the frustration of it all is just kind of like, hey, it's easier just to go out and freeze overnight than to go through this for weeks. And maybe it's also protecting other bees in the area. These guys are going to fly out and die. They're not going to pass it on to any other hives. Because in the springtime, when varroa mites want to get into other hives to explore their opportunities, and they'll go out on the backs of the bees in the hive, and then they'll jump onto flowers. And then the next passing bee that comes by, they jump on and they hitch a ride back. So they have ways of getting around. When they realize that the hive is dying, they find exit strategies because they don't want to go down with it, and they'll start riding on bees to go to other hives. And that's why they say when your colonies get robbed, by other bees coming in, well, if that colony is failing because of varroa, when those robbers go in, the varroa is going to jump onto them and they'll take them home, which is what the kind of mite bomb thing means. Yes?
Would you just I know you've said this before, would you just address the issue of why fumigating for varroa is a problem?
Yeah, the reason that we don't treat ever is for so many reasons. For one, we got echo floors on our hive, right? We're treating this like a village. Any kind of mite pesticides or miticides that you put in there kill the whole biome. They kill all the yeast, the bacteria, all the good stuff that's in there to help with the varroa. They'll take care of those too. The other thing is that when you treat them, not all the mites die. It just drops the numbers, and you're trying to get the numbers to drop. But what you end up with is the ones that are resistant to that pesticide are the ones that make it. So they just become stronger and stronger and stronger, just like our antibiotic resistant diseases that we have now, because the bugs just figured out how to get around it. And Varroa had been doing that. And beekeepers are admitting now, gee, we probably made the problem worse over the last bunches of years because we've created mites that are so hardy. We've killed off all the ones that were weakly, and we've got mites that are so strong. So yeah, and
from a hive that, let's say, has in the spring, when bees do their swarming, part of what the swarm does is or puts a kink in the life cycle of the mite. That's part of how we do our mite, or how our bees do the mite work.
yeah, that's what.
So
yeah.
This is just maybe guess. If that behavior is in the bee, that for whatever reasons they decide to swarm, maybe that same switch is about we got to leave, we're overrun. I mean, it's just a guesstimate, just playing. One reason why they would fly out into the winter, because it's what they do in the spring around.
Yeah, I don't know what the switch or the determining factor is, but we do know from the experience of commercial keepers over a lot of years that the mites have not been beaten back by any means. So whatever we've thrown at them has not helped. And, you know, there are people who say that they treat their hives like several times a year and they're just religious about it and they do mite counts and they can move their bees on to the next year and things. But then my question is, how healthy are those bees if the only way they're able to survive is that they're so loaded with drugs? And how is that making healthier bees? If their genetics aren't strong enough to survive, we're propping them up. But if your business is making honey and you'll lose your livelihood if you lose the bees, well, you'll do anything to prop up those bees because they're your honey makers. Yes?
You had named some plants that might don't like
Yeah.
last time. Could you read
They don't like mints. They kind of don't like any of the stronger smelling aromatic. Yeah, and they don't like hops. Hops is a big one. Okay, time.
I hate time.
Really?
You
Yeah.
had, what was it in your car?
Time. Time.
No, but you had.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm such a head.
Yeah.
Any of the strong smelling herbs, just like ants, it kind of disturbs their,
Try hops.
yeah.
They grow like crazy for me.
Where do you buy them?
You
Just
just
ask
ask us for a cutting. We all have those plants. So
We
yeah.
will do a plant and seed exchange at some point also. I'd love to.
Yeah.
My next question. What's the to the varroa might look like?
I don't know.
That's
I
what I
really
thought.
don't know. They're inside the brood cavity, and I don't think you would ever see one.
You have to see my
They would shrivel up so fast as soon as the larva comes, as soon as the bee larva comes out. You know, whatever's left in there is pretty much the adult mites come out, the baby mites that have hatched, and then they come out of the cell when the new bee hatches out.
So it's already inside the bee larva.
That's how it breeds. Yes.
So you have to smash the bee larva.
No. Okay. Let me give you an idea. So the mites are moving around on the combs, and they're jumping onto bees, and they're hanging around the brood chamber, and they're waiting for the bee larva to get big enough to where they're just about to be sealed. So they're watching these larvae, they're hanging out around the edges, and when the nursery bee starts putting a wax cap over that cell, the mite ducks in, maybe 2 or 3 mites duck in, and they go inside the cell, and they go behind the larva, so the bee who's putting on the covering can't see it. They just go way in the back, and they eat the food that's for the baby bee. That's kind of, there's a lot of still like royal jelly and kind of floating food in there, and so they breed in there. They lay their eggs. They feed off of the forming bee. And then they hatch, and then when the little baby bee comes out, those mites run out, and they're looking to have some more, duck into the next one. So the numbers just keep growing and growing and growing, but they breed within the cell. So when a hive goes out and swarms, half of the hive leaves with the old queen, and they take half of the varroa mites in the hive. Poof, they're off. Now those bees are not going to have any cells to lay babies in for probably a few weeks, right? They have to make the wax, they have to get some food going, they've got to get some pollen, and then the queen has to start laying eggs. And then it's another like week or two before the babies are like sealed off. So it's this whole break where the varroa are just there going, we can't breed, and a lot of them die. Meanwhile, the bees are grooming them off, and so you start out with pretty like low numbers in a swarm. Meanwhile, back at the old hive, they have to make a whole new queen. She's not even hatched yet. They're still in the cells when the swarm leaves. So the virgin queens have to hatch out, then they have to fly out and get mated. So it takes them 16 days to hatch. It takes them about half a week to a week to harden up. Their bodies, their insect bodies, so they have to dry out, harden. She's got to get her wings beneath her. She's got to eat enough to get some strength, and then she'll head out, and she'll have about a week's worth of mating flights out there with drones, and then she's back. And sometimes she will decide not to lay as a varroa preventative thing. She'll wait. And a lot of people tend to freak out then and go, oh my God, the queen never made it back, and she's not laying, and I got to get a new one, and like nothing's happening, and it's terrible. And she's in there. She's just waiting. She just wants the least amount of mites that she can deal with. And then she'll start laying. And sometimes it's 6 weeks to 2 months before she's laying. And meanwhile, you're like chewing your fingernails and nothing's happening in the hive, and the bees are like, come on, we need to kick the show into high gear. But that's the way that the bees deal with varroa mites. First, some bees are super hygienic and they just clean each other all the time. So that helps keep the varroa numbers down, and especially if you have echoflores, because when that varroa mite drops down off of the bee and they pitch it, it goes down into that flooring and it doesn't come back up. There aren't a lot of bees trooping around through the echoflore, and the stuff that's in the echoflore, there's a lot of critters down there that probably eat them. I mean, I would suspect that earwigs do, and I would suspect that there are other types of mites that eat mites. There are spider eggs being born down in there, and those little tiny baby spiders, oh my gosh, they're just hungry as heck, and they're grabbing all those tiny things. So that's why I say our management practice is our treatment. That's what we do. It's the way we keep bees that enable them to deal with varroa on their own. Yes?
So back to this hive dissection, I guess,
Yes.
Sarah, here. Do you know if that hive has swarmed in the last 3 years?
Yes. Yes, there were tons of queen cells in here.
Okay, I didn't see them. I wish you pointed that.
Right, they're not here.
Oh, they're not
They
here.
were in the other combs on the upper
higher.
box. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and I saw them up there. I saw some had been hatched out, some had been pierced and not allowed to hatch out. So I know that they've been swarming.
Okay.
And some hives can beat it and some can't. And like I said, yes, there's a lot of varroa in there, but wild hives tend to have a lot of varroa, but the bees have been able to deal with them. So it hasn't mattered that there's a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what took the hive out. That was probably a stressor, but it isn't the only thing that it could be. The big thing that bees have to deal with now is pesticides and all the sides, fungicides, pesticides, herbicides. have weakened them so much. It weakens their ability to forage. It shortens their lifespan. It makes it so they can't easily find their way back to the hive. Some bees have lost their GPS ability totally. They fly out, they don't come back. So then you have a queen trying to really ramp the numbers up because bees are dying younger. They're not coming back from foraging. She's on a race to, this whole thing. We lose a bunch of bees are laid, and you keep going like this. Well, if you're losing more bees than the queen's able to lay, within about 3 weeks, you can see the hive is gone. Just that fast of all the summer bees that get lost out in the field or don't make it back because they're exhausted. So that's the whole background setting is if the bees are not even at their fullest capacity to deal with the varroa problems because of all the other problems they have. They're also extremely susceptible to electrical current energies and to radio waves and frequencies in the air, all of that. So, we've put huge environmental challenges in front of them, and then they've got this mite to have to deal with too. So, like any number of things can tilt and go wacko. And a beginner beekeeper would look at this. I would say, look at all the mites in there. Oh, the mites kill them. Oh, I better start treating for mites. No, I mean, and that's what people ask on forums. Here's some frames. Why did my bees die? Oh, it was probably mites. Okay, I better treat. And it's the picture is so much more complex than a 2-line answer on a Facebook post.
The electrical lines, I have large electrical lines up the side of my property. Is that gonna discourage the bee?
I don't know. You will have to try it and see.
What we're trying to do here is to build stronger bees because of all of these things. So it's
So
like
they'll
my favorite bees are the bees I left with my son in North Carolina, and he decided to put them on the place where he worked. That place is got right across the street is the largest landfill in the state of North Carolina, and on the other side of the block is one of the largest um, granite holes. God knows what comes out of that hole. These bees have been, he doesn't do anything with them. They just sit there, and it's created all kinds of bees in that forest. There's this little forest. So, yeah, my thing is if you live right next to a lot of
Electric lines.
go for it.
Well, yeah, so it creates a stronger bee that's gonna enhance the area. The electron.
Yeah, and a big part of the way that we encourage them to be healthy is keep them as stress-free as possible and let them do their own thing. So, I've opened up hives like this, and I have a hive right now that's the observation hive at the school that I attend. And they called me over because they were seeing things this spring that were causing them concern. And those bees evidently went into the winter with 2 queens. They didn't see either one of them, but this spring, there have been last week they watched while a small group of bees was down on a queen at the bottom of the observation hive attacking her and balling up and like stinging her. And they said actually they watched for a long time with a magnifying glass, and eventually the bees ripped her in half. So that was the end of her. So it was like, what is this? And then a couple days later, the bees are down in the same spot. There's another queen, and they're trying to feed her, and they're tending her, and they're trying to lift her up off the bottom of the hive. I sat there and watched her for like a half hour or so, and she was not able to even come up up a cone. She was just down there kind of floundering, and they're like feeding her and touching her and stroking her. And she was a smaller bee, a smaller queen. And so I'm having to think, well, what the heck is happening here? And I'm looking at the combs. There's no brood, nothing. There's no stored honey. And I'm thinking, okay, they had 2 queens, but evidently neither one of them we're doing anything. And they're trying to take care of this one, but I'm realizing she can't even walk up a comb. She's not going to be laying a lot of eggs. And it's like, oh my gosh. So she went into winter with two. Probably she had an old dowager queen, the one that they ripped apart, who wasn't laying anymore at all. And then they had this newer queen who was going to be their new queen. And there's something not okay with her. So the bees are just fretting. And the woman at the school said, is that why they're just kind of milling around doing nothing? She said, I mean, we watch them all the time and they're always busy and they're working on comb and now they're just like milling around doing nothing. And I said, yeah, they know they're in trouble. I mean, they're in trouble. They can't make a queen because no eggs have been laid. And, I said, basically what you're looking at is like dead man walking hive. So I have to see if I can find a mated queen to offer them. Or, as Pixie said, this is a school classroom and, we're trying to teach. And maybe what we do is just say, they didn't make it. And what we would have to do then is add a fresh swarm to the hive and hope that the survivors said, good, come on in, or else there'll be a bee battle. And, that's kind of it. But I look at that queen, I don't know what's wrong with her. I don't know what the heck happened. She looks fine, obviously made it all the way through the winter. And there you go. So there's so much about what happens with the bees that are just, we don't know. And we jump on things and go, oh, it's got to have been this because I saw this. Or I saw this, so it must be that. And I encourage you never to think that you know what's going on with the bees. Say, I think that I might be seeing this. I just have to watch more closely and ponder this because they really are quite a mystery, and the complexity of their health and the things that affect it is a really big mystery. But this hive went crazy until it stopped. And for them to actually fly off and leave, that's a huge thing. And I'm just speculating. But from what Jacqueline's telling me and what I'm seeing here, that's my speculation, is that they must have flown off because there were no dead bees there. And yep. No, I don't know how to look for that, but that's a good idea.
Basically, you have to rip your head off.
And you need a like a magnifying glass and stuff like that.
Really, they're kind of white color, but you can tell them very different. You don't have to do it for light, you obviously do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. A tracheomite. Well, once again, you have to hope that the bees can beat it because there's nothing you can do for it.
I usually don't. Because I don't mess with it that much. It's just part of the. I think you probably meant necropsy as opposed to autopsy. Isn't it a necropsy with a?
Yeah. Yeah.
So shouldn't you have found more mice in the box then, or adult mice?
One would think, but I didn't.
Well, part of the problem with that is they have little grids that you can put down to count. But if you've got the ecofloor, you're not going to see that.
Nothing on those mite boards. I saw nothing on the bottom board that was like a lot of mites. But if they ended up absconding, it could have been that the mites left with them. I don't know. I don't know. But it's good to look at comb like this and get used to looking in those cells where you can't see anything. You're holding them up and you're looking and looking, go, I don't see anything. I don't think there's any eggs. I don't think there's, so, get used to this, just flipping them around and staring at them. Of course, in the hives that you might have, which might not be Langstroth, you won't be poking around in comb a whole lot. But if the hive perishes, yes, then you can go in and see what you see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the mites can't live once the bees are gone. They don't like hibernate for a long time and then kind of come back like like ticks do. So it's fine. But actually, Jacqueline only had this hive because for a teaching tool. And she doesn't run Lang, so she's going to take apart this whole thing and not use it again. If I were using this hive, I would take this old comb out, and and then I just leave the empty bars and I leave the honey because the honeycombs still look really good. They haven't been worked a lot. They're in nice shape and they're full of honey, and I want the bees to be able to have them. But these older brood combs, I would take them out and use them to bait other hives with.
What I do with my, I lost them, all 5 of mine, not this past one. Is I number one, I put this all into the freezer. For me, it's to slow down or kill off the
Wax moth larvae.
thank you, wax moth. And then I take 2 of these and put them to the side here. And then I load it with empty bars or frames, and then I put them out. I put them out in my yard with the 2 black ones on either side, and that I attract swarms with because I've got. Like I said, it's a bait box.
The top open?
No, it's all sealed
it's
up.
closed up.
But these 2 on the end, the thing is, I know these 2 are on the end. They attract the bees. They build it out, and when I go back in again, if I'm going to harvest honey or whatever, I know that these 2 are black, and I treat them accordingly. I don't pull honey off, even though they might have honey in them. I put that back in the freezer and give it to swarms. I don't.
So, talking about the freezer and wax moths, we've had a number of evenings in the last couple of weeks where it's been it's been steadily under, 30 degrees. So in the 20s. Is that enough to kill the wax moths or not?
I think so. That's freezing.
Right. So it doesn't have to be like several days in the freezer. That was enough to kill them all. Okay.
It's a science thing.
Yeah. Also, I'm not sure what those eggs do. Like how seriously cold for what length of time it needs to be on those. Jacqueline was taking apart one of her hives and processing the honey from it rather slowly. She had it in her little back room, and she didn't get to it for a long time. I was like, I got to go do that. And when she went in, the entire hive was totally webbed with wax moths. She couldn't even get the honey out. It was like, that's it. So don't leave these things around for a great length of time because the wax moths do move in and part and parcel it out.
Okay, so how do we know when we can get in the hives? Like I have 3 I suspect died, but it's too early to get into them, don't you think, to look? Or no?
They should have been out by now. Yeah. I mean, if you see no dead bees on the entrance board at all. They actually do. Yeah, I mean, I'm watching my girls, yank them up out of the, my skeps have just a real narrow little bamboo tube entrance. And in this last cold snap now, they're pulling them out of that little tiny entrance and dropping them around the front of the hive. So yeah, you should be seeing them. And if you haven't seen them at all, the other thing you can do is take a stethoscope, which I know you have, and just knock on the box with that stethoscope. And if they're in there, you'll hear them. Yeah. No. Well, yeah, but if you're thinking that they're dead, I mean, you can handle this a little bit differently. Yeah. So I encourage you, if you've got combs at home or things you're looking at, I mean, spend time just with the combs and poking your nose around in them and seeing what you can see. With something like this where there's many boxes and there's a lot of honey in it, if you pull out honey to process it, and if there's areas on the comb that aren't sealed, but they've got, they're obviously wet, so they have nectar in it, you've got to freeze because they'll ferment like that. and then you won't be able to use it. Yeah. And on a lot of combs that I have, like, if the hive is perished and then it sits for a while and I go back in and sniff, what I can smell is there's that fermented scent where the nectar, didn't make it, so it's fermenting its way off. It's turning itself into mead. So, when you want to process honey for yourself and you pull out a comb, and if there's parts of it that aren't sealed up, cut those parts out and put them aside in a dish and keep those, and then use those quickly. They'll last in your fridge for a long time, but they won't last outside of your fridge. And yes,
You could also freeze those and then reuse them later on for the bees.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, if you've got freezer space, it's nice to be able to feed bees with comb honey or old nectar. So it's just a matter of maybe picking up a small freezer or just
Well,
keeping it.
so, and what you said, I like that idea, but also, could you just put that out for the bees? To let them just go in and clean it out?
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah, if like Jacqueline just left this hive open with the 3 boxes on top,
They'd
oh
get in
my,
and
every
warm,
bee
yeah.
in the county would be there.
Maybe
You
the
know.
honey beer too.
Yes, just stripping it right down. So yeah, they'll all use it. And I've left hives like that sometimes in the spring, and what you get is a lot of really curious bees who come from out of the area, and they eat and they fly around your yard, and they know that that hive is empty. And sometimes that's enough for them to remember, hey, if we swarm, we're going to swarm there. So sometimes it's just a nice attractant to get bees. Now you wouldn't want to do that in summer, late summer, because then they'd rob all your hives. They would come in and rob the empty one, and then they'd start looking at all your other hives. But I am convinced that those round entrances may solve all that problem completely. What?
I want to bring this up later.
Okay, cool. So, any questions? Yes.
Well, just on that, so last spring, my neighbor, in the winter, raised a hive, and he just left it. And he had a couple other hives. Well, we think one of those hives swarmed and moved into that hive.
Mhm.
And he didn't even think about that. He just left it because didn't have time to go in there and do anything with it. Yeah. And it was great. Yeah, the bees just came in and took over. And
Last year, I gave her a Warray hive. She had her top bar hive that had a bunch of bees in it, and then she had the Warray hive, and there had been bees in it, so there was lots of comb. And she'd been telling me for a long time, there aren't any bees in my neighborhood. There aren't bees in I don't see bees anywhere. So they're not here. And so then she moved bees in, and what we were expecting would be that box, that top bar would swarm, and then she could put those into the Warray. Well, before that happened, she called me up and she said, oh my God, the hive is covered with bees. So obviously there were bees around somewhere. They had found her yard. They had found the hive. They were pretty intrigued, and they moved in. And there were so many, they couldn't even fit in. It was like a 3-box Warray, and half of them had to move on. I mean, it was a huge swarm. So you never know. When you have honey and bees in your yard, I think other bees are kind of watching out for your place, and you start seeing them more, and it's like they like being where bees are with those empty hives. I'm going to have several empty hives just sitting around my yard this year, so I'll be curious to see if anybody moves in. Bees talk. Hey, go to that place. There's a really nice Warray there, So, does anybody have any questions about spring or what's coming up, and any confusion that you have, or are you able to find hives? Have you made the decision about what types of hive bodies that you're interested in, or anybody struggling with any questions coming into the bee year?
Well, these hanging hives that we have for the trees, what do we do for our eco box on those?
Those are babies. They go into the hive that we made.
Oh.
That's what's confusing you. That's just long enough for them to go, ooh, and then you go, yeah, but check this out.
Yes.
Transferred in your hive.
No, you were transferring. That's why we're calling them a bait hive, as opposed to your hive. So we're making hives to attract swarms, and you can hang them anywhere. No, it wouldn't starve because they're going to fly in like any swarm does, and there's nothing there, and they're going to start building immediately, which is why when you have bait hives hanging out, check them often, very often. So don't put them somewhere like 20 miles from your house where you're not going to go, because I can tell you within 4 days, you'll have 6 full combs. And then it's like, well, I don't want to waste this. And then you get the fun of taking a brand new white fragile comb and trying to tie it up in whatever hive that you have, and it doesn't work. So what some people do who are real serious about the bait hive thing is, let's say that you want to go with Warre hives. So you buy 3 Warre hive boxes, and you have the little strips across the top that are the bars, and you nail on a wooden bottom, and you nail on or screw on a wooden top, and you cut an opening in it, and you put in some comb and things to attract them, and you hang it up in a tree or set it up, between 2 big branches of a tall tree, or tie or strap it up high. If bees then move into that, well, then you just take it down and set it on your second Warre box. So they're all ready to go. So you don't have to move anything. It's a really handy way to do it. If you've got top bar hives, you can't sit your top bar hive up in a tree. It's a difficult one.
Our baited hive looks like a mini top bar hive. And this is what I do with the Langs and also with the Warre, is that I mostly bait in the box. So all I have to do is take that box and put it, and all of this is, like the 2 pieces of wood on either side, removable. And that works really, really well.
And that way there's no fuss, they're already building, you don't have to move them from one place or the other. If you've got them in the peat boxes, you unhook the sides, and then you're going to have to pour them into a hive or invite them to walk into a hive and hope that they haven't built a whole lot. So check those bait hives often, unless, like Debbie said, you've got the box, it is your hive, it's up in a tree, and they can sit there and start building out just fine.
These are very common.
Yeah. The Warres aren't. They're really nice small size. Yes, Thea.
So, Barry designed and has designed a box that is kind of both. It can be used as a bait hive box, which is supposed to go up in a tree. We've got a fundraising site to try to get people to buy these, and we can place them on sites, public, private, and even people's homes if they want them.
What's the site called, please?
It's the fundraiser site, and we are, as a group, we're promoting this so that we can get these hive boxes up in the Camas, Washougal, Ridgefield, even Portland maybe, who knows, area. This is for people who would like to have a box and they don't really care whether they collect the honey or not. They're mostly interested in bees, and this is what we're trying to do. So we've got this fundraising campaign to try to get more safe places for bees to live, and those boxes are really easily baited and are going to be placed in trees. So if anybody's
website on this?
Yes. And the website for this is on the Preservation Beekeeping website. So there's actually what is the name of that pop-up thing that shows up when you first get into the site?
A welcome mat.
A welcome mat. I love that. So there's a welcome mat, and it asks you, would you like to do something about this? And then you can actually go directly to this fundraising site and look. And basically, the money is to buy the materials and monitor the hive boxes 3 times a year. So it's a combination of building the boxes, placing them on the sites, and then monitoring them, including with endoscopic cameras and possibly even thermal cameras, infrared cameras. So if you wind up buying a box that way, it could be on a different site other than your property, or it even could be on your property. But then you get to look online and see what the bees are doing because we're going to post about the different
Now
boxes.
is that the $80 charge, or is that, what's
No,
the charge for
That's
that?
a whole different thing.
Yeah.
That's
Charge for the whole hive. It's
We're hoping that people that wanna help the bees but don't wanna touch it, don't wanna do anything with the
Right,
bees.
what is that gonna cost?
200.
It costs-
$200, and
Yeah.
they'll take care of it for the year.
But there are people that don't have $200, so they donate 50 or 100 or whatever, 25, and then we're going to put all of those together, and we will be co-owners of a bee box, and they'll all have names. So you'll be able to monitor from afar
So
remotely.
you guys are gonna monitor all of these?
And
Mhm.
post the videos so people
Yeah.
can see in their hive without opening it.
Updates. So far, we have 7.
How
That have
many
been
people do you
purchased.
have in the monitor group so far?
So far, we have 7 boxes that we have been paid for. Yes, and we're hoping that other people, not only if they come are interested in doing it here, yes. If they know people that would be interested, yes. Share the information, and then maybe other people would like to do that. And that way, we're providing safe habitat, secure place for bees to live. And Susan and Jacqueline have said, 3 feet or higher up off the ground. Well, if we get them up in the trees, then they really will be safe. People won't mess with them, and the bees will come and go as they see fit.
So how are you gonna monitor them?
A little camera
Go
on the
ahead.
end of a scope.
I mean, I have I'm gonna put a port on the bottom of them. I'm gonna use just one of those cheap endoscope cameras you can hook up to your iPhone and just shove that up in there and take pictures and a little bit of a video a couple times a year
Oh,
and
okay.
just see how it's
So it's
doing.
not monitoring all the time?
No, just 3 times a year, yeah. Yeah.
If you left it in there, they propolis it.
Yeah,
You won't be able to see very long.
There's a worm in my hive. We're getting
That's the plan.
Okay.
I would have worked.
I have,
I want you to come out.
and most of my neighbors.
I'm not in Southeast Portland,
My question is, how long, the important thing about the bait hive is the behavior of a swarming bee is why you and I can do it barehanded or naked.
Mhm.
But as soon as they start building, do they start acting like bees and now you better watch out?
Oh, yeah, they're a little testier.
So it's really important to check them daily if you want to be able to handle them and tell them about a new house before they.
As soon as you see
No.
if you see them,
Around there, and you're watching them, and you know they're coming and going, get the hive down. Because what Thea said was basically, when bees are in building mode and they've selected a home, which they'll select that bait hive as their home, and they'll start building. And then all of a sudden, they have something to lose. They've got wax up there, and they've got some food up there, and you're trying to take it away from them. They're like, no. And they won't be as necessarily as gentle. They won't necessarily be aggressive, but sometimes their behavior can change at that point. So, you want to get them out of there pretty much as quickly as you can, which is why if you can hang your hive up in a tree, I mean, that's great, or hang parts of it up. I want to give Brian some time to talk about the logs that he found, just to see if there's anybody in here who wants to give him a hand with this. Go.
Some of them, of course, the big trees, that are fir trees, are going to sell a lot longer, but they have some chunks of wood that some of them are rotten in the middle. It would make really good log hides. Right now, I talked to the guy, gave the secretary, yesterday, that if we come in on the weekend, he says absolutely not on the property. However, there are a number of logs, very good sized logs, that are on the side of the road where he put them specifically for people that want to cut wood for firewood. Of course, people who are cutting for firewood don't want the ones that are rotten in the middle of the big ones. So there are some, there's some pictures if anybody's interested. I would have to show you this morning. I stopped on the way here, take some pictures to make sure they were still there. So it's interesting. I don't know how many people have thought about log hives, or I've become quite interested just recently because
That-
That's the issue, absolutely.
Well,
Literally,
meet with him.
Have you tried trucking?
What kind of tree is it?
Let's do this dialogue afterwards, okay?
Yeah, 'cause we're-
There
we're
he
on
is,
the way.
and he's got and if you're interested, get a group going and be proactive and go get your logs. It's wonderful. It's a great resource. I mean, it really is. If you're thinking along those lines, that's how you make friends in the bee world. Just get in on a little project and go with it. The log hives are really, really fun. And we'll be doing more and more and more with them as the years go by, as we learn to work them better. Barry's getting some real specialty tools to kind of carve them out and smooth them out. And it's kind of a whole world unto itself. It's really, really neat. I wanted, right, right, right. Yeah, now we got to know what to do with them. So I also wanted to mention that I sat down this weekend and I thought about our organization, Preservation Beekeeping Council. And we've been functioning now for a little over a year and had lots of ideas, and the website's getting going and many big plans. And then I sat down and really thought about this, like, where are we really at? How many people are on board really working it? What kind of projects can we really do? And I came up with the kind of a startling conclusion that so far, Thea and I have pretty much been driving the whole thing. Thea's the only one who's making us money. She's done 2 crowdsourcing campaigns now, and I'm the one who kind of got this started and the club and everything else. But in terms of people who are proactive, like saying, well, I'd like to work on this project, or I think we could do this. What do you think? Nobody has really stepped forward to play like that. And I don't know if any of you want to be involved in that way or if you've been pondering, but we would love to have some more help to grow this organization a bit. I know it's volunteer work and, most people don't like to volunteer, but I will tell you that if you're involved in any of these kind of projects and working on them and involved with them, for one, you really get close to our bee community and you'll make some great friends. And you'll have, and by being closer to the group, there will be more resources available to you. That's just the way that it happens. You'll hear about bees, you'll hear about a project, you'll hear about something that's coming up. So we would really like to grow our little group a little bigger. So if you're a person that has some time and would like to, get involved in something bee-oriented, we'd really love to have you aboard. And if you would, go talk to Thea. And she'll make a list. She'll make a list of people that we will then call on. Debbie is going to be taking over the swarm list this year, so you'll be seeing more of her and talking to her a whole lot. And also, Debbie has also stepped forward. There are some big fairs going on this year, art and garden fairs, and we would like to have a presence there. And so Debbie's big on that. So if you would like to get involved in any of that, helping to set up a booth, what kind of handouts we need to have, banners, that kind of stuff, check with Debbie, because I think that would be like a really, really fun thing.
I know Debbie, it's true.
Yeah. So
will you share that like on the Facebook page or on the website?
Yes. Yeah, I might, yeah, something you can send out.
mhm, yeah, there's nothing to say about Bee City right now in Camas, but we have been talking about trying to get Camas to come on board as a Bee City USA, and what that means is that the city would have to declare itself that, fill out some forms, pay some money, and every year do pollinator-friendly projects that they report on back to the organization. And for that, Camas gets to declare itself a Bee City USA certified, and they have like signage around town, and they partner with other nonprofit groups like Master Gardeners and things, and groups like us to do pollinator forage, have bee fairs, do classes, observation hives in schools, possibly bee-friendly planting strips, and where the lots are empty, or any kind of habitat restorative type things that will serve pollinators and all that. So the city is way excited about this, and we're stepping forward to kind of get that ball rolling. So we've had a few meetings, and they're all jazzed, and now I need to have another meeting and actually start making dates about when they would apply and what we would do.
She's been doing a lot more than that about and Jacqueline about regulations for hobby beekeepers, which is kind of the category that we fall into if you're not doing it commercially. And at some point, that's going to affect a lot of people that are interested and encourage other people to become beekeepers or be involved in promoting bee-safe habitat. And there's going to be a need for volunteers.
Yeah, we're excited about the new Camas bee law. We're going to propose some pretty unusual things that most communities aren't doing yet. But we think that with Camas being small, we might be able to pull this off. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to ask Camas to make it so that if you're a beekeeper, you need to source your bees locally, like within a 100-mile area. And it will not be legal to import packaged bees here. You'd have to get them as local nooks or swarms, because and the way that we're explaining that to the city is there's a lot of pests and things for bees that we don't have in this area yet, and you don't want to agriculturally bring in those kinds of pests. And so that's how they've all gotten spread all over the country, is through packaged bees. Well, then just don't have packaged bees, because that also makes it a really nice bee economy for people to sell swarms, to grow local bees so that they can provide nucleus colonies for new beekeepers. It's a great thing to have in a community, and so far we kind of don't. And we're also going to pitch them to see if they would be agreeable to saying that, at least in the bee law, that it would start there, and that the bee law would hold it that if you're a beekeeper, that you need to be not using neonicotinoids or glycophosphates on your property. And maybe if we can get that going just even within the bee law, because you don't want to be keeping bees on properties that are saturated with that stuff. And maybe if we can get in the door with that, then our next pitch would be to come to Camas and say, we would like to get glycophosphates and neonicotinoids banned from the city, period. And right now, there's a movement afoot by a group in Portland who is trying to make Portland, greater Portland metro area, pesticide-free. So we'll see, we're kind of moving in that direction with, different people taking it from different directions, and maybe we can accomplish something like that.
Just for people to know, if you haven't checked the Bee City USA site, that's one of the major pieces of their campaign. There's a whole bunch of cities across the country that have this designation, including Seattle and Puyallup, and well, I'm talking about Washington first, and Ashland and and a few others, but those two, which I think is interesting that Seattle is doing that. Mm-hmm. And so, it's not that no one's doing it yet here in Washington. They agreed to that. So that's a pretty big deal that Seattle would have done that. And so, why not Camas?
Yeah.
It would be a great school project if anybody's involved in the public school system here, high school, 1 year long project to work with beekeepers to have something like this, the Bee City USA placard.
Well, and I just wanted to bring up that, we were talking about Barry's boxes and Bee Haven. It's called Bee Haven. We need volunteers for that. We need people who are interested in putting up the boxes,
Open your little cameras.
putting the cameras in there, taking pictures, sending them to Barry, sending them wherever, Ginger, me, whatever, and then, you know, and also, and part of the money that is being collected for this is going to, if people want to do it, but they don't have the money for gas, because it's expensive to drive around, then that, some of that money would help those people pay for the gas. And I posted that so people knew that we're contributing, that this was the case.
We're also hoping to have a little booth at the Camas Market on occasion. I am, because I like it, to get more of the locals to understand what we're doing, so that when people see things, they can get an answer. What are you doing? So, and if you like to stand around and bark in the middle of the street, I hope somebody joins me. It's fun.
I'll be there. Any final questions before we wrap it up for this month?
Got one question. On the bait hive, does it have to be right up, how far can you move the bait hive to your regular?
That's a good question. The weird thing in my experience has been that if you catch a swarm in your yard and you take it down fairly soon and get it into the hive box and move the hive box, the bees won't end up going back to the area where the bait hive was hanging. Like, where did our hive go? When they're in that kind of swarm delirium, you can catch them in one spot and move them to another, and they don't go back. So that seems to have not been a problem for me in my yard with any of them.
So does it say you have it a mile away?
That's fine. There's like hell, they're not going to go a mile away if they won't even bother to go across my yard. It's like, nope, we're in a new place, we're fine. So yeah. Yeah, just be sure wherever they are that it's someplace that you feel comfortable going by pretty darn often. So thank you all. We'll see you next month with bait hives finally. Yes. You're
And if
welcome.
you want to talk about doing markets or fairs with Debbie, hang out.
Do these belong to
And the
anybody?
log.
So, but I think maybe they belong to,